Let me introduce them briefly, then they can talk about themselves and introduce themselves. First one is Jen Cromarty. Jen is the Chief Executive Officer, recently appointed, of the Committee for Geelong. Jack Nyhof. Jack, welcome. It says here Jack is an 18-year-old. We won't ask Jenny how old she is.
I'm 50 this year.
Oh! Jennifer is the 50-year-old Chief Executive Officer of the Committee. Jack is an 18-year-old gig worker and university student from Golden Plains Shire. And Dr Fiona Gray, who is going to introduce them and conduct the conversation. Fiona is the Director of Civic Collective, a design and research consultancy based here in Geelong.
I thought we might start off by start with you, Jen, perhaps asking you to give us a bit of a brief background on the status of creative industries in the region.
Hi, there's a few friends in the room. I don't know how many people have heard me speak about this before, but my journey's been in and around creative industries for quite some time as a policy piece of work, I suppose. So, plotted history back in 2011. Regional Development Victoria asked me to do a bit of work for Rural Councils Victoria, and that was to look at the opportunities of creative industries in rural communities. So that became a paper, an opportunities paper, which also had some economic data around it, but it piqued my interest as a Geelong resident as to what creative industries could do as we heard Ford and Alcoa were closing and our transition from heavy manufacturing into what could be the new economy here in Geelong. So I lobbied with love here locally in 12, 13, 14, by about 2014 I realised, and Anne-Marie, I'm always going to rope you into this, I started a Facebook page called Creative Geelong. So I thought, let's see if we can start telling stories about Geelong's creative potential. What are these jobs like? What are the impacts on our economy? And Anne-Marie just tracked me down and it's just really interesting, full circle, isn't it, Anne-Marie? And just went, who are you and what are you doing? And so from there, we actually formed a not-for-profit called Creative Geelong Incorporated back in 2015. And again, I'll try and praise you this, but that journey really has been about, raising the awareness of creative industries, which are jobs that use technology. So, software developers, programmers, etc., but include the visual and performing arts, but include architecture, includes designers, it includes PR and marketing people. So there's a lot of information out there on Creative Geelong's website about what the actual sector is, but we needed to map it. So part of that work was the LEN. You'd be aware of this, I'm assuming, over the years of the work that the LEN's done around the environmental scan for the creative industry. So that was a really important piece of work to help raise awareness and talk to key decision makers in Geelong about what the sector is, the impact on jobs, where the potential was. And so from 2015 to now, Creative Geelong Incorporated has a board. We've got a couple of projects, one being the Makers Hub in Centre Point Arcade, which is really a demonstration project. Now that might be a long answer, I don't know, but it's more to say that in Geelong we've now got the Cleveland Creative Vision, which, Creative Geelong was pretty, I think, important in terms of that conversation, and the UNESCO Creative City of Design designation, which was given to the City of Greater Geelong late 2017. But these are really key planks in what Creative Geelong would see as being a way to talk to community about creative industries and what the potential is. And I think moving forward, the sky's the limit around how we can progress that conversation locally. And our funding streams have come from Creative Victoria, state government, as well as the City of Greater Geelong. But notwithstanding, we also face our own funding, whether it's pressures, but we've got some excellent partners here in Geelong as well supporting our work. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that's not too long-winded.
I just want to make a comment to people because I just realised that everyone, why on earth are we randomly talking about creative industries? Like, far out. And it's because, and you'll listen to these guys, but we're going to add another industry to the trending industries. So creative industries will become the 9th industry sector for this region. So it's really to introduce you. That's like breaking news. That next year when you look at the annual report, there'll be 9 trending industries, and that means that we're going to be encouraging young people to explore opportunities in that sector. So we're actually talking it into being, and these guys here are actually the people who are holding that vision and driving that vision in the region. So I should have actually said that at the beginning. That's why we're having this conversation. Cool.
Thanks, Sandra.
Small gap in the information.
Jack, you're a gig worker, is how you describe yourself, and it's in the creative industries. So just, are you able to give us a bit of an insight into how you led into that pathway of creative industries?
Yeah, sure. So it's sort of something that you stumble in. You don't really plan on going into there. So basically, last year I did some work with the state government on a youth advisory panel called the Victorian Youth Congress. It was the first time that this program was being run, and basically the state government decided to get a group of young people together to sort of discuss issues that are affecting youth, and we reported directly to the Minister for Youth. I made some really good networks and contacts in the Office for Youth in that experience, and basically after that experience finished, I reached out for some work experience or potentially internship, and they actually got back to me and they said that would love to, contract you for a number of hours to sort of do digital engagement work around the Victorian Youth Summit. And that's sort of the real entry point into sort of the gig economy for me. Prior to that, I had done some sort of work experience around with the Golden Plain Shire Council, doing some videography work and that sort of thing. So it's sort of, these opportunities sort of came up and I sort of jumped at them and said yes and really responded to them. And that sort of brought me into the gig economy really. So yeah, I guess it's just a sign of the times that these sort of opportunities are fixed term and they are only for the sort of project-based work. And I sort of responded and adapted to that, and that's sort of how it came to be.
So you've obviously needed to be quite agile to be able to respond to those opportunities. What sort of challenges are there for you working as a gig worker, particularly in the creative industry space?
Well, there's a lot of skills that you constantly need to be around and update, and each role has sort of unique pressures and unique situations that you really need to respond to. So I guess that is a significant challenge, is how do you prepare yourself for these different roles, and you don't know what's around the corner. So for example, at the moment, sort of my time with the state government is coming to an end, and another challenge is how do you go about finding the next role or the next gig, and that's a significant challenge, I suppose, for me, just the uncertainty of it as well. So there's pressures around sort of the skill sets that you need to be on top of and develop, but there's also pressures around how do you sort of sustain income between jobs, and that can be quite hard as well.
Absolutely. Jen, are you able to give us a bit of a vision of how the committee for Geelong sees itself supporting and fitting in with the clever and creative agenda?
I probably should frame this response by saying I'm no longer the president of Creative Geelong. Dr Fiona Gray is, who's next to me. So, I'll hand over any discussion further about what we're going to do next about Creative Geelong to Fiona. But Committee for Geelong, very interesting. Can't say, it was surprising, I suppose, to find myself in this situation, if anyone knows me. And I've worked in community now for a few years here in Geelong, but one of the first things that really I was quite passionate about was engaging community not-for-profit groups in the work we're doing. So, and I'll get to the answer of the question, but what was really important to me is that the Committee for Geelong is for all of Geelong, and that we have diversity of voice. We actually provide the opportunity for these community groups and not-for-profits who I know are doing significant research and policy thinking to have a voice to our broader membership. So our membership is statutory authorities, government-issued organisations, as well as commercial entities. But I felt that we needed a stronger voice for community. So we're actually, I think within a day or two, we'll be bringing on 20 organisations, I think, roughly, who are either renewing or coming new into Committee for Geelong. So in terms of creative industries, one of the things, and this is part of legacy work of the committee, they did identify creative industries as an important sector, and they wrote a Second City Policy Framework document last year. So I've grabbed onto that with two hands. If the committee didn't have a position around creative industries, how I would have approached this role might have been different, but they did. So I've basically got to the point, and this is, I don't know if it's breaking news or not, but there's 3 projects that I'm briefing in terms of some research work, and one of them is how are creative industries as a sector going to be developed? And I've actually just had an email this morning from a researcher wanting to then now deep dive into what that brief would look like. But creative industries, I thought, and ask away any questions, but I don't think it should be seen as like an economic development plan. I think it needs to be a conversation, and I think it needs to be understanding people like Jack and his experiences as much as people who are coming into the region who've got incredible skills and are bringing all that knowledge and potentially businesses here to Geelong. What are we doing to create the environment for them? How do we give them the space to think and learn and collaborate? So it's a very different way of thinking. It's not like bringing the TAC to Geelong, it's very different. Love the TAC, but it's, you know, if you're talking about creative industries, it's all about the thinking and the future of work, essentially. So what would that plan look like? So from a committee perspective, we've got G Park, the Art Gallery, Deakin, back-to-back theatre. I'm going to forget, but Cotton On, I've even had a chat to, you know, about saying what are we going to do to actually develop this piece of work that's actually going to have impact on the ground and not be a document that just sits on the shelf. So that's one of 3 projects I'm briefing in at the moment, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to more broadly engage with our members and with the community in the next few months about what that work looks like. So that's where the committee, I think, best fits.
Great, thanks. How do you see, Jack, the region and organisations like Committee for Geelong and Creative Geelong being able to support young people in their pathways into creative industries?
I guess something that I should touch on a little bit first is more broadly my background. So I started volunteering at 94.7 Pulse Community Radio at 14, and I sort of stumbled into sort of the radio broadcast industry and sort of stumbled more into communications from that over the years, and also a lot of work around jobs and that sort of thing. So I think some of the ways that we can be supported as young people is really skill development. I suppose with the gig economy, the skills that you really need to know is a lot about those entrepreneurial skills, those self-management skills. So that can be things like invoicing or tax or work rights, and even more broadly with general employment. That was something that came out of the Victorian Youth Summit, was work rights. A lot of young people don't understand what an enterprise bargaining agreement is as opposed to what award wages are, and you know, those can be some of the significant challenges that young people do face. And experience is a huge issue at the moment as well. A lot of employers do look for a significant amount of experience. But as a young person, how do you get experience if you can't get a job in the first place to gain that experience? And I guess that's something that organisations and stakeholders in the Geelong region could probably really help with, is sort of giving those entry-level experiences for young people and really helping them develop those real-life skills, because there's only so much you can actually learn in a classroom, and there's so much more that you can learn from trial and error and just being in the real world.
So that's a practical thing that can happen within the region. I suppose one of the things that we've experienced in the creative industries is a bit of a brain drain, where young people move out to Melbourne or want to move to a capital city or see that the opportunities are outside of Geelong. How do you think we can keep young people like yourself here?
I guess that is a significant challenge, and for me wanting to go into sort of broadcast news, there's no real opportunities apart from, say, K-Rock and Bay FM, who have about 4 employees that do that in the newsroom. So there's not significant opportunities, whereas in Melbourne there's a huge array of TV networks and other opportunities around there. So I guess from a communications background, it's really promoting the opportunities, because there are a lot of industries that are moving to Geelong. There are a lot of industries here for a broad range of skills in the creative sector, and we're really trying to develop that. So maybe really promoting those skills and promoting the stories of people who are succeeding and showing young people that you can succeed here, and there are experiences that you can and opportunities here that you can really utilise, I think is probably a very important thing to do.
Yeah, sure.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I've got both my kids, one just about to move to Sydney, the other already there, working in publishing. So here in Geelong we don't have that kind of work available, but the data that isn't yet released, but I know that hopefully in the next few months there'll be some data that I might be able to share, but what's happening in Geelong is that rather than there being not just a migration of young people, 18 to 22 I suppose, going to Melbourne, but there's a lot more now coming back between the 28 to 35, so it's people buying the houses and wanting to maybe settle and go into another phase of life, and so that's the opportunity for us. I think it used to be more older people, maybe tree change, sea change, type migration trends, but there's been a big push, and you will feel it. Most people are nodding. Armstrong Creek, big growth areas here where we're providing a great lifestyle opportunity, and here to imagine well. But that's where I think creative industries and tapping into those people, these people come to me at events and go, we found our tribe. We didn't know there was a group of people really interested in this work. And one's the adult ballet studio, which is just, I don't know if you've seen it, but I get all my info on social media, but a couple have come down and they've started this business here, and they purely identified Geelong, partly because one of them has had a history with Ford, but they didn't know anything about Geelong beyond Ford. And they stumbled on Packington Street and went, oh my gosh, we're moving. So they've come down here and started a business and are doing really well, but they were so grateful for the work we're doing in terms of, developing a community for those people to engage with, and great coffee.
That's important. The coffee's important. Actually, we did a study, a research project that was looking at what makes people love where they live, and it was done in Melbourne, and the number one thing that came out that makes people love Melbourne is coffee, above all else. But we're doing better in terms of coffee in Geelong, which is good to see. I suppose this is a question for both of you. How do you see the opportunity being for, not just for the committee, but more broadly speaking, for young people and the community's leaders to work together to really build Geelong's future as a clever and creative region?
I think there's a number of opportunities in that space. I guess for me, one of the most valuable things from my experience sort of with education and whatnot was, once again, those opportunities outside of school. And I actually went to Geelong High School, and Ken Stewart was one of my principals, so did Jed. And I was really, really, thankful for Geelong High School for really supporting me with those out-of-school commitments. Often, they would give me a day outside of class to really go out and go to these events and that sort of thing, which I was really thankful for, because talking to other young people, their schools didn't really provide those experiences. A lot of the time, those initiatives or those needs were shut down by sort of the school principals and that sort of thing. So I think Geelong High School does a really good job at really listening to students and taking on board sort of the other things that they want to do. So I guess those are really important opportunities, as well as listening to young people. But I guess more broadly, as far as how community can work together, I guess it's all about communication and really listening to the stories of individual young people and where they want to go and what they want to do, and really supporting those visions for themselves. Because a lot of the time, sort of lost my train of thought here. They really don't get the chance, and a lot of the time young people don't believe they can do certain things as well. So I guess that's really important as well, is sort of showing young people that these are the opportunities there, and the fact is that you can just jump in there and you can actually do these things if you set out to do them. That initial barrier, I suppose, is that intimidation as well. I think is a lot of challenge for young people, because they just really don't know what to expect, and I guess perhaps there's a fear of failure there as well. So I guess just fostering that support for young people as well, and providing those systems and opportunities, I think is really important.
You've got me thinking now. So I'll say that I'm interested in thinking about how do we get young people to have a voice at the Committee for Geelong. So I'll take that on board and maybe talk to you. I'd like to just talk about the LEN, and I'm aware of all the LEN's work, and I've worked in and around some of the LEN's projects over the years, and how can the Committee for Geelong better work with the LENs? That might be something to also think about. But when we actually talk about young people, and it's not just about creative industries, so one thing we are doing, which will be public soon, is the Women in Local Democracy group, and they're launching a YWILD, so the Young Women in Local Democracy. So that's going to be launched in about 3 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, by the Minister for Women, and the Committee for Geelong's putting in some seed funding, partnership money, to help kick that off. And that's about giving young women a pathway, a role to have mentors, to learn. So the young women who go through the YWILD program will also have access to the Committee for Geelong in terms of its Leaders program. We'll be able to offer, some access through that program to a couple of those young women, as well as access potentially to our member briefings as appropriate. So it's not just giving a bit of money, it's actually trying to get them involved with the work we do, and I'm challenged now equally just by young people generally and what we might be able to do. So happy to have a chat and see how we can swing it around our constitution.
Well, there you go. We've just made a connection. That's great.
I would just like to add just briefly as well is I think there is a slight issue with a lot of the time that young people are talked about but not necessarily included in the conversation as you've just raised, and I guess a lot of people can tend to form preconceptions or stereotypes around young people which can often be proved wrong. So I guess a challenge to everyone in this room would be to really sort of ask young people those questions and keep an open mind, because often you'll be surprised at some of the things that young people do think about, or they do enjoy, or they do consider, and I think that's really important.
I suppose recognising that young people aren't just a homogenous group. So there's as much diversity amongst young people as there is in old cohorts. So there's different ways that young people need to engage depending on how it works for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Where do both of you see the gaps at the moment in terms of employment opportunities, education and training challenges, issues around infrastructure?
So I've recently moved into Geelong just this week, but before that I lived in the Golden Plains Shire, just near Bannockburn, and a huge issue for me as a young person was 100% transport, and that was a huge barrier. Also the internet wasn't the best there, which really didn't help. But as a young person, it's really disheartening, and transport is such a huge challenge for you. And I guess I got my license on my 18th birthday. I turned 18 in December, and it wasn't a challenge then, but you really forget how much of a struggle it is. And once you get your license, you think transport is insignificant. You don't really think about it. But for young people, it's really hard to get from one place to another place if you don't have your parents taxiing you around all the time, which I didn't. So that was a huge barrier for me, is how do you physically get to work? How do you get home from work? Even if you do find a job. So I think that is a huge barrier. Also employment opportunities in rural and regional areas. There's not a lot of options, particularly for young people. So that can often be an issue for young people as well. So I think transport is a huge barrier, and it comes up time and time again when we talk about young people. In any context, I've done a lot of work around mental health in young people, and access to services and transport is right up there as well. So I guess in such a huge community, particularly in a regional area like Geelong, strengthening transport, I guess, is a huge challenge, but it's such a complex issue because obviously transport's not viable if you don't have a number of people using it. So it's a real catch-22 as well. Like I mentioned before, the gaps, I suppose, is really allowing young people to identify what opportunities they can take and really allowing them to dive into practical opportunities and experience, I suppose, outside of the classroom. For me, I was a very academic person, but for me, the school environment really doesn't suit me. I prefer to sort of be out in the real world, volunteering with stuff that has tangible, real outcomes. You can do really well on an assignment and you get a high grade, but that's great, it ends, it's just a number. For me, I really like to see sort of the impacts of the work in the real world. For example, my work with the government doing digital engagement at the Victorian Youth Summit, I helped amplify young people's voices on the Youth Central platform. That's tangible work that is making a difference in the community, and regardless of what industry it is, the real work can make a difference, whether it's hospitality or whether it's communications or whether it's a trade. You can really do practical experiences that make a difference in the community. Construction projects, for example, can be a really big one. So I think allowing young people to have those practical experiences outside of the classroom, which allows them to develop a diverse range of skills, and also just identifying that young people aren't lazy, aren't all these stereotypes, and that they can actually do the work, and really putting some faith in young people and valuing their input as well and their diversity. Young people have a lot of great ideas and they can be very innovative as well, so I think that's a real asset to have that diversity in any business. So I think just really identifying those opportunities and those experiences gaps, and some gaps around support and transport as well.
If I can just share a little anecdote, because I empathise with your pain around transport. My daughter turns 18 in 14 days, and she's booked in for her licence in 16 days, 8 hours, 3 minutes, 2 seconds. And the reason why she's not booked in 14 days is because she's doing her VCE and she has 2 SACs 2 days in a row. The meltdown that occurred in our house when she realised she couldn't get her licence on the day of her birthday, because the desire to have a licence is just, it's not just about a licence when you're so limited with transport options. It's a ticket to freedom, it's a ticket to being able to contribute. And she is we're in a similar situation to you, out of town, she's completely reliant on her parents, and at 18, it's okay if you have parents that are able to do that. I've got some flexibility where I can run out of town, go and get her, bring her in, go back to work, that sort of thing, but that's not possible for all young people, so it is a very significant limitation.
100%. I had my test booked in Ballarat actually because there's no appointments in Geelong. I did open up, so I was able to get it on the morning of my birthday, but that's how important it was for me. And I guess just talking about that, another point that's raised in my head as well is people from Melbourne don't really understand the dynamics of a rural area or even a regional area as well. I know a lot of young people simply don't have their licence because it's not a concern for them. That's a key difference. But a lot of people I'm working with YACVIC at the moment, doing some consultation around mental health. And a lot of people in the room, they mention about services, but they don't quite realise that there is none. And that's a key example as well. So it's a huge dynamic where you have to travel to get places, and just the physical distance as well between areas as well. Like for me, an hour drive isn't that significant, but for a lot of people it is, just living in a rural area. So I suppose that is a key difference as well.
Jen, what other gaps do you see?
I was just thinking, we've just come from a session, haven't we? Rob Birch was at a strategy and policy committee meeting this morning. We started at 7, so we're punching through. So we actually I can live feed what I think that group's looking at in terms of challenges, and transport is huge. What we do about that will be the question in terms of the committee's role. Skills development came up a bit, and a lot about disadvantage and not leaving anyone behind, and Gray was mentioned, and Northern Futures, and so we did a little thinking about that, and I've spoken to, I know Keely from the Gordon and Carly, I saw you in, so we've had a bit of a discussion about one of the other research projects being in and around what does workforce development look like in the future for Geelong, but the long-term planning. So I won't go into all the detail there, but for me personally, and it's also come out through a member survey, and it did come out today, is having a dynamic and functioning safe CBD. And if we're going to be like, our guy went up to Melbourne, 18, up the road, didn't get a licence, rode my bike, got trains, didn't need one. My 29-year-old still doesn't have a licence in Sydney. So that's the challenge for us as a community. How can we make that attractive so you don't have to get a licence, so you don't have to have a car, so we don't have to have all the issues around parking in the city, but how can we develop a CBD that's actually going to support that for us 20, 30, 50 years into the future, so that we can live, work, breathe in and around the city comfortably without having to rush out on your birthday and get a licence to be part of our community. So they're probably the 3 things. Transport, yep. CBD, huge. But equally workforce development across the board, and what can we do to bring all of our wonderful partners together?
That's it in terms of the questions that I was wanting to ask our panellists. Is there questions that anyone has from the audience? Scott.
Can everyone hear me without a mic? Okay. I'm just really interested to ask the 3 of you something that I saw stitched together at the very start of the conversation about the gig economy and the creative space and creative Geelong. And Jack, your desire to go into the radio broadcasting technical space, I can't remember the exact details, but the fact that the opportunities, like there's only 4 or something in Geelong for that sort of role. So the prospect of the gig economy, I wonder whether or not, do you think that there's value in developing or being able to develop a personal brand that's portable? And I wonder whether or not that would enable, because if we're going to bring new industries like radio technology or broadcasting into Geelong, it may not happen overnight, it might be just a slow bleed. So for our young folk to be able to be portable and have a personal brand such that they can be doing multiple things whilst perhaps the main thrust of their interest starts to develop in Geelong so that they can jump into that. What are your thoughts about that leading into each other?
I think that's extremely important these days, and I guess that's a huge milestone of the changing workforce, is the fact that you do have to personally brand yourself these days. And that includes everything from social media, from accounts like LinkedIn, Twitter, even Instagram and Facebook. You have to be really careful about how you present yourself in the professional space as well. And networking is becoming increasingly more popular, more important rather. I'm quite lucky. Networking is something that comes somewhat naturally to me, but for a lot of young people, you know, the whole social dynamic and the whole idea of, you know, connecting to people on a strictly professional basis can be quite a challenge for them to navigate as well, and that's sort of a key area where skill development is really important for young people. So 100%, you know, manufacturing and sort of creating that genuine personal brand is hugely important, and it's really how we find jobs these days. It's a lot around how you present yourself in the online space, your portfolio, your body of work, the value you can offer to companies, and really how you stand out in the workplace as well is hugely important. And there are a lot of skills that are so essential, and young people really need to chime into, and even in such a crowded online space as well. It's such a noisy media environment these days. And I think it's important from anybody, from somebody who works in the trade, to sort of have those skills to market themselves, because that's how they can get business, to somebody who's a professional in the professional world, because that's also how they get work as well. So 100%, you know, having that body of a brand and a professional portfolio is so important these days.
I'll be brief, but my older daughter has a job, a day job, which is in creative industries, but she's also one of those Instagram influencers. So she's created a business on the side where she's paid to promote her products that get sent to her. It's out of this world. She's also got a podcast, which is what I was going to bring up about the radio piece. You can generate and create podcasts, you know, without having a fully fledged studio. We've got a multimedia studio in the Centrepoint Arcade in an old fridge. It's great. Come and rent it out. But she's developing a profile with that podcast as well as a product then could be sold to commercial stations. So apart from a full-time job, she is gigging effectively and creating then her next wave of potential opportunity. And she's got an eye on the money and what that's going to look like. And so all I can say is they know I talk about them all the time, because she talks about me on her podcast, so it goes both ways. And it's really just to say these are real things. These aren't just crazy things that people think about in their bedroom. These are actually real things that are happening in my kids' lives at the moment.
Couple of questions. Jack, any chance you can get them back onto Channel 31?
That was an amazing...
Sorry, for anyone who didn't hear, I'm not sure if everyone heard, that was about Jack has previously done a program on Channel 31, so the question was, will there be more?
Yeah, well, thank you for watching and thank you for your support, firstly. You know, it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to produce the TV episode, but it was a really valuable experience, I suppose, for me. And I produced a show, one-off episode called GCN Focus, which focused around 2 episodes, actually, positive local stories in the Geelong community on Channel 31, which is a community channel based in Melbourne. And I've actually networked with a few other people who are uni students who are interested in this space, and hopefully we are going to produce this year another show with a sort of more state audience around positive local stories. So we are onto that, but yeah. Thank you for your question.
It was a two-pronged question. How about asking the Upstart Challenge man about Upstart Challenge? Is the gig economy?
Could very well be. So 100%. Any opportunity I normally say yes to, because, you know, any experience, you learn skills and valuable skills that you never thought you would ever learn. And that's sort of where I've got to where I am today, is just saying yes to all these experiences. One opportunity leads to another, and that's really how you sort of make traction. I always say take small steps forward, and when you look back, you know, you've taken leaps. So it's all about slowly stepping forward, I guess.
Thank you.
I moved from Bendigo 18 years ago to Geelong, and one of the things that surprised me was that Geelong didn't have its own TV station. And I think it's a significant disadvantage for the community, because all we get is Melbourne stuff. We don't get much of that local stuff, which, you know, Jack's talked about. And in terms of creativity, it also doesn't allow us to sort of promote our own creative stuff in Geelong. So I think you look at towns like Ballarat's got their own TV station, even Shepparton's got their own TV station. So I think a big boost for Geelong in terms of developing that sort of sense of community, rather than feeling like a suburb of Melbourne, would be around having got a local radio station, and actually having a full-time TV station. And given the population, I'm sure would be quite, you could actually support that sort of venture.
I suppose we can only dream.
I've been presented over my skills, nodding different business cases around this over the years. I'm happy to re-look at it, but it's really about the community wanting to put, I think, their money where their mouth is, I suppose, because it's not an inexpensive exercise. So it's interesting because it has come up time and time again, and it's usually driven by people who are already producing the content. They might live down the coast. They want to be able to have a place to do that. And I don't know if you know Joel Carnegie, but he is a younger man who I think works for GPAC War Museum, I should know. But he approached me years ago with this idea of a space company, which was to develop a really high-end multimedia studio with really high-speed broadband feeds straight into Melbourne, so content could be created here locally and fed straight up. If anyone's tried to do this work, I've done it in the past where I was running an event in Lawn and we were doing really high-quality video, and we were trying to work out how to get it to the stations. We were going to hire a helicopter. We ended up using a hotspot and did it on a low broadband feed for about 3 hours. We got it through, but these are the realities of the sorts of things that we need to do to tell our story right now. So I'm happy to take it back on board and dig up that business case, but it was from a single person in Geelong who worked with a business consultant who developed the plan, but it did hit brick walls, so Kelly would probably know.
Yeah, I would love to have more media in Geelong, and that would be absolutely amazing. And I suppose the joys of today, as you mentioned podcasting before, but with YouTube, that's monetised as well. So there is opportunities to really, generate profit and from online content as well. And that is a space that, commercial TV stations are grappling and news services are grappling with as well. They're losing so much ad dollars to online. As a huge proportion of our dollars are online at the moment, is how do they make money from online content? And I suppose that is an opportunity as well that we can look at, is really, driving that and pioneering, how to make money online. I actually have a Facebook page called Geelong Community News, which I do, it's just me and a few other people that contribute to it, but that's videos have got up to 10,000 views as well, and it's just a small operation, so I think there's potential in the space.
Sorry, not walking away from having a commercial station, but again, I know people who purely don't engage with commercial TV at all and live stream everything, whether it's YouTube or Stan or Netflix or whatever it is. The world's changed completely. So as long as we're really good at content production, you can do it from anywhere.
I guess, Jeff, this is more for you. Jack's comment earlier about making sure the youth voice is captured. One of the challenges I hear is that we talk often about a social capital that exists in lots of our community where networks of families have access to occupations and so on. For our young voiceless people who don't have those connections, when you talk transport before, issues around getting your L plates and getting up hours, 120 hours can be a real challenge. So I think what I like, the work the LEN's been doing for a long time is to access some of the voices that don't come through mainstream doors. So I'd love for the community of Geelong to think about how you're going to access those voices of those who are voiceless.
An open opportunity. If you want to put in an expression of interest to the committee, please, contact the office. The LEN, more than welcome to join. So Anne-Marie and I had a bit of a discussion about that. It's not all about me, it's not all about the board, it's about every single member that we have and how do we represent those views. And Northern Futures is a member. I was going to say grow, but we've had that discussion, this is gone. But, how we tap into young people I think is really interesting, and even the schools. But if there's a group that can represent that voice, that's great. As I said, I'm going to try and think about what we can do to tap into that a little bit more directly without it being tokenistic. So we do have schools as members as well, so I might have a chat to you. I know what you do and the work you do. So I'm aware, as I say, of all the different work that's going on. We've kept it as open and transparent at the moment, but it's open at any time really to have a discussion about that. And I'll just explain, community membership based on a certain kind of criteria and what you will bring to the community in terms of your skill sets, your thinking, your networks. You know, the fee is not the issue. You know, we can provide pro bono membership and or, you know, an exchange to a degree. That's the conversation. Others pay, and that's fine. But just to let you know that there is that open opportunity. There's a group out there who believes, and we put it in the paper a month or so ago. As I said, we're going through that first tranche at the moment. We do have a cap, but, you know, we've still got room.
Yeah, I guess it's just the glass ceiling stuff that exists.
As in for people getting into employment and having those networks?
Or any the conversation shape their Geelong. So young people who live in certain suburbs that don't have a large advocacy on their behalf, how do they get a voice? How do they find it? If you've got networks, if you've got social capital, that's easier to do. Schools can be a voice for some of the young people, those who are disengaged from school. How do they get a voice? How do they shape a city that's maybe not working for them?
I'm happy to hear what you think.
But I also think that's where organisations, not-for-profits like Creative Geelong are playing a role. We've recently done a social impact survey, and that came about really for us to try and understand how we're engaging and why we're appealing to often a lot of people who are quite disengaged. And we think what's happening in that space is that we're not going out saying, here you go, we're a service provider, we're providing you with a service because you need us. It's more that we're saying, you know, we run great workshops, we do this creative stuff, we've got a network of people who are interested in creative things, and it's open for everyone, we're inclusive, and if you want to come in and check us out. And that's kind of how people have been, and it's been quite a deliberate decision to set up Creative Geelong in the Centrepoint Arcade on the mall, which is you know, as everyone knows, is a highly problematic public space. And a lot of people that spend time in that space are now spending time in Creative Geelong. Of their own volition, they've created study groups, but it's a safe space for them. So there's sort of that, I think there's that top-down approach, but there's also that grassroots stuff that needs to be nurtured and supported through funding and recognised that grassroots stuff has to have a voice at the table around UNESCO, City of Design discussions, around clever and creative. It's that grassroots stuff has also got to be part of the conversation.
And I'll put the Creative Geelong hat on, not the committee hat, and say that part of the success, I think, of Centrepoint and Creative Geelong's Makers Hub is back forces there, Adolescent Task Force, Department of Justice with their Suit for the Job program, Genu Gamer, which I might have mentioned. I feel like I talk to different people all the time, but dealing with particularly young people with anxiety and spectrum, challenges, autism spectrum challenges, and Good Cycles, which is equally engaging young people around bike mechanic work, but helping them get into pathways for employment. So from a Creative Geelong perspective, and Creative Geelong will be a member of the committee, which will be able to hopefully bring that voice through in that way. But it doesn't mean it's the only voice. But you're right, it's not, what's the word, pro-social. What I've uncovered, because I've come from an economic development background, is that when you don't go out there with a welfare first or a school first or a government authority voice first, people are coming in droves from all demographics, but people who feel like they are welcomed, and it's often their third space. So Fiona's writing that research. I can't wait to see it in the next month. So when that comes out, I think that will be a really good feeder into this conversation about what's the role of space and safe space and creative spaces to our young people, and how they can then engage in their work, and they are getting work experience at Creative Geelong.
We talk about that idea of Creative Geelong being a third space, because we talk about the first space being your home, your second space being your work environment, and then or school, and the third space is those opportunities for social connection in a public space. And often those third spaces can sometimes be people's first space, because they don't have a safe and secure home. They've dropped out of school, and they don't have work. And so where else do they get their social connection other than in a third space? And there's very few third spaces in cities these days that don't require you to pay money. Even going to a cafe, cafes are often called a third space, but you can't loiter there all day. You've got to buy a coffee, and you've got to spend your money to stay there. So these sorts of organisations and spaces are really important. One more minute. One more question?
without drugs, which is good. I'm just wondering whether the opportunity for us all to be working together is to actually, when we do our next strategic plan together, to kind of formalise some sort of agreement around looking at the creative industries from an education, training, employment perspective and engagement perspective, so that we say it's a trending industry, it's our number 9 trending industry, and what does this region need to do about making those pathways available to young people, all young people, particularly young people who are vulnerable, into that sector. That could be a really, really fantastic piece of work. And I know through Upstart as well, so Greg is here, and he's already pitched an idea about, so he's been mapping a Certificate 3 in business to creative and entrepreneurial types of activities, but how we actually get some formal training in place as well, that kids get, accredited training into this area. So look, we need to kind of consult more broadly, but I'm just thinking there is a ripe opportunity after today to think about that piece of work that we could all be doing together.
If I could just jump in there as well, I would like to really emphasise the sort of value around co-design as well, and really sort of consulting and engaging with young people in a really meaningful and lengthy way through a variety of means, whether that's conversation or surveys, really touching base through a wide range of channels, because young people like to interact in different ways, and really just asking them how they prefer to interact, because for a lot of young people in a lot of different communities, that can often be different, and some of the feedback you get can often be, challenging or surprising, which is a good thing. So co-design and I guess peer-to-peer communication when it comes to young people is hugely important as well.
Well, it's on film now, damn you, so yeah, I suppose we'll have to consult, engage you. All right.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, audience.